So we are good to go. So thank you for joining us for the second week of our legislative update. Do want to introduce real quick our sponsor, Scott McGarry from Washington Gas. Scott, thank you so much for being a sponsor for this event for the next several weeks. And I'm going to hand it over to you for a quick little update on your end, and then you can introduce Delegate Brewer if you'd like.
Yes, well, thanks very much. I'll give you just a few additional fast facts, building on what I mentioned last week, a few fast facts about Washington Gas. We have in Prince William County 81,783 customers, a very important part of our 1.2 million customers around the Northern Virginia area. We also serve Loudoun, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, as well as parts of Shenandoah County. And with that, I'm happy to introduce Delegate Brewer. I've had the pleasure and privilege of getting to know her since she first came to the House. She's truly a rising star on the her side of the aisle, earned respect on both sides of the aisle. In fact, she and Delegate Mullins are the only two members of the House of Delegates I've ever seen who have publicly at least been seen during a session drinking wine. She can explain that if she wants, as co-founder of the Wine Caucus. But she's earned respect. She understands the business community because she's a part of it. And I'm very, very pleased to help Ross welcome her and look forward to her comments.
Thank you so much, Scott. Delegate Brewer, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I guess it's already afternoon, but I've been on a couple of Zooms, so, it's been quite a long day. First of all, Scott and Ross, thank you so much for your kind words. It's an honor to be able to work with both of them daily and to work with two people that have such great insight into the legislative and political process. Serving in Richmond is a very unique experience. First, I want to say hello to everybody on the call, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll talk a few minutes about this General Assembly session and how things look different and how we can advocate differently. So first, I was elected in 2017 to the House. I represent southern parts of Virginia, everywhere from Suffolk to Prince George County, the Hampton Roads Metro, all the way up to the Richmond Metro. So I have rural, suburban, and urban communities, and I have a wide range of businesses that are in my district, everything from manufacturing to data centers, just small and large businesses. So I hear very unique perspectives when it comes to that. Personally, as they both mentioned, Delegate Mullen and I do love wine. We're the co-chairs of the Virginia Wine Caucus, and that stems from Williamsburg Winery being in his district, and I am a small business wine and craft beer shop owner in downtown Suffolk. And let's talk a little bit about business for a second. This past year, I know, has thrown so many of us curveballs, and I know with an entrepreneurial spirit, so many people are so great at being able to pivot. During COVID, with executive orders that were difficult to interpret, I would say that pivoting has been very difficult because we just don't know what the next step is. We don't know if we're stepping up, stepping down, or stepping sideways. My business alone, I've had to move everything around and replace everything in my business, from product to seating to everything in between, just to be able to comply to stay open during executive orders. So in situations like that, I feel anyone's pain who has gone through that, because COVID has made that increasingly difficult. I really would like to talk this year also about how small business and large businesses have been affected, but also more importantly, we are in a virtual session in the House, unlike the Senate. And the very interesting aspect of this is that legislation is moving at a more rapid pace than it ever has before, ironically, as we do it virtually from our homes, and me sometimes from the Capitol. This is the first year since the General Assembly has been in session that we have done this virtually. It's also the first year, in my knowledge, even prior to serving in the House, that we allowed legislation, even with amendments or edits to the bill, go from subcommittee to full committee in the same exact day. So it makes Scott's job and Ross's job 10 times more difficult, to be frank. And so just make sure you're on top of your email inbox when they send you guys things. Try to act very quickly, because I will tell you this, yesterday I was in a subcommittee. We made major line amendments to an education bill, and it went to the full committee that day. And so it allowed about a 3-hour time window for people to weigh in their comments. And it's very rare, if at all, that some of us may see it. I'm pretty tech savvy, so when Ross sends me an email, I read it immediately, and Scott too. But it has been quite a year. We are making fiscal decisions and appropriations that will affect Virginians for years to come. And we're seeing quite a bit of bad business legislation, including right to work, yet again, has been filed. In years past, the Senate was our backstop in many pieces of negative anti-business legislation. And we hope that if it passes out of the House this year, that will continue, but there is no guarantee. I serve on the Republican side of the aisle, but my best piece of advice to everybody here: if you do business in somebody else's district, don't just reach out to your delegate. Reach out to the delegates and senators where you also conduct business. That sends a ton of extra leverage to your message. Oftentimes, people that aren't my constituents reach out to me, and while I'm very happy to assist them, it's also very imperative that we give someone else the opportunity, if they have previously made votes that are probably not in line with where our business sensibilities are, that you also reach out to them and you let them know where you stand on a situation. We always have to give people the opportunity to either succeed or the opportunity to fail or fail again. And so one of my best pieces of advice is accountability is key, especially if you conduct business in other people's districts. It still gives you the opportunity and leverage to reach out and communicate your position. As you have all probably seen in the past week, things have been moving at a rapid fire pace. I'm sure that you've received a ton of emails. But what I would suggest is this, is that if there's something that is of concern to you, reach out to your advocates, reach out to your delegate. And if you don't get them, find the next person on the list that can assist you on those committees. And, for anyone that is on this call today, I would be glad to do that. I anticipate there will be several pieces of legislation that will make it out of the House. Again, like I mentioned, make it to and knock on. Hopefully we will be able to defeat it. It is an election year, so that could mean, frankly, that there's some people that may stray away from some of these bad policies or may run towards them, depending on the makeup of their district, or if their fear is of a challenge from the left or the right. Knowing someone that you support them and that you have their back to some degree on issues is equally as important. And so for those of you that do that, I'm very thankful for that. But I really would like to take any questions you guys might have. We're pretty early in the legislative process. We have yet not reached crossover. And I think once we reach crossover in a couple weeks, when House bills go to the Senate, we'll really have a better idea of the writing on the wall of what our plan of attack will be for any of these anti-business bills. So while it may be alarming that some of them may leave the House chamber in a couple weeks, we still will have another opportunity and a stab at defeating some very anti-business and bad regulatory bills, hopefully when they make it to the Senate. So with that, I would love to take any questions you guys may have, or anything at all you can ask.
Perfect. I will get us started, then I'll have anybody from the audience as well kind of kick it off to Emily. One of the big questions I think that'll be on people's mind is, how has COVID impacted the state budget? You have a seat on the House Appropriations Committee. What are you guys discussing, hearing, things along those lines in regards to the state budget and things along those lines?
Well, so, we will be allotted during the session. We originally had said we were going to do 30. We're going to do the traditional 45, and we're going to use the last 15 days to work on the distribution of those COVID dollars. So any legislation that gets referred up to appropriations, I believe the number is going to be about 1.8 billion that will be coming into Virginia. That's an estimate right now, that will be able to fund many different pieces of legislation. The concern I will have, and something that we need to really think about long term, and I've been an advocate for, some of the proposals are coming forward, whether it be mental health, whether it be business funding or things of that nature. Some of the new programs that people on both sides of the aisle want to create because of this, what they perceive as an influx of new money, I have very much pause for concern, because oftentimes we know that when we offer something, it's very difficult to eliminate it. And so what I've been encouraging behind the scenes is some of these new projects, we need to be able to put what's called a sunset provision on them, that they expire at some point, provided the funding mechanism is either not there or it's tied to revenue generation. And that's something that I think we need to keep our eyes on. And so with some of the input, as we start to see more and more bills that are passing forward, we're going to have to be very judicious in what we do and making sure that we don't create a funding shortfall in the Commonwealth based off of new programs, whereas at the time when we received additional COVID dollars that we can no longer support. And so I'm going to have my eye on the ball on that to make sure that we don't put the Commonwealth's bond rating in jeopardy going forward, or a rainy day fund.
Perfect. Any questions from the audience? I do have a couple more myself, but wanted to open up to those attending today. Feel free to ask. In the meantime, I guess one of my questions too is, I know there's a plethora of bills out there, but what business or what industry do you feel might be impacted by a lot of these negative business bills that have been going through the General Assembly so far? I know that you've been kind of reviewing it like we have, going through I think it's 1,200 to 1,600 total pieces of legislation that were introduced this year. But kind of just want to get your feel on what you feel, what industry would be most impacted this session, other than all of them.
So, well, all of them, I would say, frankly. Some of the overarching policies are the scarier part that will affect every single industry. Right to work is probably the biggie that does come to mind. But when we're talking about some of the issues like unemployment concerns, additional open-ended policies that deal with, paid sick leave or paid days, or COVID-friendly policies that appear to be COVID-friendly, are of much concern. So while the title at the front of some of these bills may say COVID relief or COVID friendly, those things are of a major concern. We passed a bill out of the Housing and Consumer Protection Committee yesterday that was of supreme concern for those that are, obviously small renters, small time landlords, not major corporations. And so I think where the rubber meets the road this session, I'm very concerned about, is that we have a lot of bills that are targeting not just very, very large businesses with thousands of employees. We have policies and businesses that are going to target very small employees. I have less than 4 employees, and some of these things don't even provide exemptions for people that have under 50. And so my biggest concern is that we need to make sure that we are assessing the capability of some of these businesses to be able to put any standards that might be passed in place equitably. And I just feel that the House has fallen short on that thoughtfully and methodically as they've passed out legislation.
Perfect. So I did get a question in the chat box. The arts is one of the hardest hit business sectors. The arts industry is in need of significant emergency funding. Is there any discussion about distribution or appropriations for emergency funding? The Virginia Commission for the Arts has a funds distribution network that could assist with emergency relief for the arts sector.
I believe that's actually being addressed. So the Speaker of the House is actually very, very big into the arts. And then also so is Delegate Mugler, who's from the Peninsula. And she chairs actually an arts advocacy organization, which I'm very supportive of. My best friend works in fine arts and theater, and I have her in my ear every single Friday night in my business to make sure that I address this. There are some mechanisms that will be coming. The question is, this is where things are very much in flux. So depending how legislation passes out of committees and makes it to appropriations, and we do the final budget, will depend on how many dollars are left over for other things. So we have to fund things that are absolute priorities that are continual, and then anything that is introduced and new will be distributed separately. I do understand there is emergency funding that will be set aside for the arts. We don't know that final number yet until we get through of the bills and the business in front of us. But I will say that I know there is a focus on that. I think that the arts are one of the biggest outlets, especially when people are working or Zooming from home. And it's imperative and part of something that I think helps us not only culturally, but mentally and also emotionally. So I do believe that there is a strong direction of making sure we address that.
Perfect. And if there are any other questions, please put them into the chat box as well, and I can ask the questions of the delegate for you. Another question I have, just so more of a statement really, and you could just kind of embellish on it if you would, Delegate Brewer, would be just, can you go through what a day in the life of you currently is compared to last year during a normal session versus this virtual one in terms of the block schedule and things like that, so that those in attendance today and for those that'll be watching the recording later can understand the difference between last year and this virtual session and the time restraints. I know that before we were able to get you on, you had a bill up in subcommittee that you heard about, I think yesterday, late afternoon. So just kind of want you to expand upon that for everybody listening.
So I would say the hardest part is this. So last year, I would usually get to the office between 6 and 6:30, maybe as late as 7, depending off if it was a heavier floor schedule or committee schedule. I serve on 3 different committees, and I also serve on 5 different subcommittees, including making sure I present my own bills. Last year, I would start my morning very early. And when people are in the building, it gives someone like Scott or Ross, if there's something coming up that day or that week, they can pop their head in, they can drop off some paperwork, review some of those issues or policies. And it gives me a couple minutes to get with them. You know, it might be 2 or 3 minutes here or there, but it's a valuable 2 or 3 minutes. Because instead of getting a piece of paper or having a face-to-face conversation where we can mark things in the moment and address things that are coming up on our calendars, now that we're doing things mostly via Zoom, it makes it increasingly difficult for us to make it through that entire inbox. Last night I was at dinner for my mom's 70th birthday, and we sat down for about an hour and a half, and I had over 450 emails by the time I left dinner. I don't want anyone to feel like things are falling between the cracks, but because we're all virtual and people have less access to us, it makes it more and more difficult. Normally we would go to the floor around noon. Now that we have 4 o'clock floor sessions, it makes it harder for people to even stop for dinner or spend time with their families when you think about the human factor. And that also applies to Ross and Scott and all of you, because it means that you have to have your ears and your eyes open for their emails and making sure you're way into that process at an hour that isn't traditional. Also, the other issue is that I've always firmly felt that we could have done this socially distant. We did it during the special session on the floor of the VCU Siegel Center. And I had hoped and proposed that we would be able to have a appointment-based only, a socially distanced opportunity to meet with everybody. So that way we can really feel one's draw or tie to a piece of legislation up front and face-to-face to a degree. I feel like people have the right to agree or disagree with me at any time, and that's someone's right to be able to access me. If the ABC store is open, my business is vital too, or the DMV is open, then you guys should have a right to find a way to access your legislator outside of Zoom. So my biggest concern is that we might be passing bad policies on Zoom that we don't know the full effect of, because we weren't able to talk with all the stakeholders up front prior to some of these things passing. So that would be my greatest concern and the detriment to being virtual this year.
Perfect. Final call for questions for Delegate Brewer. I know she has a busy day today, so we will, if you don't have any more, we'll let you go, Delegate Brewer. Was your bill able to get heard earlier, or are you still waiting on it?
Well, I will tell everybody what I was working on is I'm working for an affirmative defense bill for victims of human trafficking. And so I had that bill last year, and it passed the House 99-0. But because on virtual Zooms, technical difficulties abound, and it's very difficult and cumbersome to be able to vote that way. Unfortunately, I will be on the floor. We did a floor session at 4 today. My bill got moved to the evening docket around 6:30. So I was able to hop off of that Zoom and hop on with you guys, and really appreciate you guys having me. Any other questions
Absolutely.
I can ask?
I believe Scott McGeary has a question for you, Delegate.
Ask away, Scott.
Yes. Well, thanks. Just thank you for your thoughtful references to Ross and me, and we do look forward to seeing you in person soon. And also, just to support your comment about meeting in person, every year I visit Annapolis and their legislature. I won't be going this year because of their setup, but just so you know, that's one example of a legislature that is meeting in person, as is the Senate here. Their Senate's doing it with plexiglass up around in their regular chamber, and the House has 141 members, which I think is 41 too many. but they are equally divided between the House chamber spaced apart and then in their House office building. And so I'd suggest you and your caucus members keep that in mind should we ever face the situation again. Where there's a will, there's a way. Thanks.
Well, and what I this is as a member of the Republican side of the aisle, I worked with our leadership and I set up actually an offsite office that is socially distanced with sneeze guards and masks and hand sanitizer and anything that any of you would ever need. So if anybody on the Zoom today would like to meet with any of us, as long as that legislator or myself might be down there, we do have a separate offsite space that we did foot the bill for to make sure that if people wanted to meet with us on very serious issues, we do have that accessibility point. And because we were shut out of our own building besides just ourselves personally, I just felt it was incumbent upon us to be able to offer that. But I will give credit where credit is due. The Senate Democratic leadership, they're in town and they're conducting the people's business in the capital city. And I think that was the right move. And they should be commended for their leadership in doing that.
Yes,
I will say too that I was down there, I believe on Tuesday this week, and I did go into that office as well, very socially distanced, sanitized and within the governor's orders. So that was a very good experience and provided me the opportunity to meet in person with some members that we needed to get in front of. Any other questions for Delegate Brewer before we let her go? All right, hearing and seeing none. Thank you so much for joining us today, Delegate Brewer. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure I will see you sometime next week.
Good. See you then. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, moving on to the next portion of our legislative update. I do have a quick little summary of bills that we were watching this week. Again, this is not entirely everything we were focused on, but this is kind of the main points. So we will get that started for you. All righty. Can everybody see the presentation? Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. All right, everybody. So just giving you a weekly update for January 18th to the 22nd. We will start with, of course, the legislation that we supported, the fun stuff. So HB 1923 was electric utilities expanding the existing broadband capacity program. This is the program that the General Assembly set up last year, a pilot program to expand broadband throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia with Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power. This is a bill that we supported. It was introduced by one of our delegates from up here in Prince William County, Delegate Hala Ayala. It did pass through the House Labor and Commerce Committee with flying colors unanimously and is currently on the House floor. I believe it will be voted on later today. Another bill we supported was Senate Bill 1158, Port of Virginia tax credits. Previously at the Economic Development Committee, what we've done before is bring in speakers, one of them being from the Port of Virginia, who explained the importance of the port and why it is such a huge economic engine for the Commonwealth of Virginia. We supported this piece of legislation because they reached out in regards to the facility tax credit, barge and rail usage tax credit, and port volume increases tax credit, kind of extending those credits from 2022 to the year 2025. That did pass unanimously through Senate Commerce and Labor and is going through to the Senate floor for a vote. The next bills were HB 2161 and SB 1410. Active duty military or military spouse prohibits discrimination in public accommodations. This was a larger, more encompassing bill. We've teamed up with the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce as well as the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce and other groups on this piece of legislation. What this does is it protects military service members and those connected to it from discriminatory policies. Currently in Virginia, one of the issues that can come up is if you are a spouse of somebody who's active duty military, there is actually the ability where somebody doesn't have to hire you because of that, because they may lose you within a year, 2 years, or 3 years. That's something that the Prince William Chamber and other business organizations do not support. Delegate Tran from up in Fairfax, our neighbor just north of the Occoquan, and Senator Bell, who represents a chunk of Western Prince William County, were the two major sponsors for this piece of legislation. Both are currently in their respective bodies' general laws committees waiting to be heard upon. Another issue with this bill is in terms of housing. Currently in Virginia, we are one of the few states where if a military member or their spouse has a lease on a house, they're basically waiving away some of their rights in terms of the leasing agreements, in terms of the 1, 2, or 3 years that they may or may not be in the house in terms of breaking that lease. So again, these bills address those issues that are coming up. And again, for everybody, if you have further questions on these bills or others, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is rsnare@pwchamber.org. Another bill we supported was SB 1314, Education and Labor Market Alignment. This is a piece of legislation that came to us at the direction of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. They had requested that we support this bill. It is one of the governor's priorities for the legislative session when it comes to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. And again, this presentation can and will be sent out to those of you in attendance today. Another group of bills that we supported were HB 2204 and SB 1405, the Get Skilled, Get a Job, Give Back G3 fund and program, getting that established. This is one of the governor's major education initiatives as well. It basically works with the community college system and establishes the quote G3 program for the purpose of providing financial assistance from the fund to lower income and middle income Virginia students who are enrolled in an education program at the associate degree level. Again, this is something that we want to do to make sure that we have the best workforce for tomorrow, and this program does do that. It is currently being carried by the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader. It is currently in the House Education Committee, and in the Senate, it was referred to the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee. So we will track this legislation as it continues to make its way through the legislative process. Now, the fun part, the legislation that we opposed this week. One of the big ones, and Scott, I'm going to ask you to speak up on this one a little bit, but that was HB 1934, Public Utilities Gas Pipelines Prohibited in Residential Subdivisions. I will say that we had a major success. This is one of the good successes this week for us. We were able to get that bill laid in Labor and Commerce Subcommittee. I think it was Sub 3, which is the Energy Subcommittee, at a vote of 5 to 4 to 1 abstention. And Scott, I'll let you take over and discuss that with the group.
Yes, well, thanks very much, Ross. You made a tremendous difference on behalf of the chamber in killing or tabling that bill. It would have provided that every replacement of a gas line touching on residential areas would have to be approved by the governing body. It was occasioned, the bill was occasioned by Delegate Simon receiving some constituent opposition to a long planned project to replace service in the Tyson's area. Some of our oldest company pipe going back to the 1940s was in that area. And it was an extensive process over several years in studying routes and recommending to VDOT what made the most sense. VDOT approved the route that has the least traffic impact, the least impact on business, and made sense in terms of the length of the project, the cost, every conceivable way. A citizen filed suit. In that case was dismissed by the Fairfax County Circuit Court, and that dismissal was sustained by the Virginia Court of Appeals. There is still time for that to be appealed to the Supreme Court. The General Assembly normally does not act on legislation on topics that are the subject of pending litigation. That reason in itself would have been a good reason for the bill to not go forward. But it was had it gone forward, it would have ramifications of economic development and gas reliability and safety around the Commonwealth. And so I very, very much appreciated Ross. He was the first to whom I turned for assistance, and we had a coalition of area chambers, the state chamber, every gas utility, and for all the good reasons, the committee did decide to lay it on the table, and the the role that Ross played was very significant with respect to our Prince William member of that panel, Delegate Ayala, and I very much appreciate your support.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott.
I hope that summarizes it well. Please add anything.
I think it does. I think it does. I think the key thing for everybody to understand is a lot of these quote bad business bills that Delegate Brewer kind of referenced, a lot of them go through these subcommittees and committee meetings, and that's where we do have the most impact. As you can see, this was a 5-4 to 1 vote. Had that abstention gone with the no, it would have killed that motion. The bill possibly could have gone on to the full committee for a vote. So again, the key is us being able to get these bad bills laid on the table or passed by indefinitely early on in the legislative process so we can continue to move on. This is one of the highlights of the weekend was, I think it was Monday morning that we were up at 7 a.m. working on this bill. So yeah, it's always a fun time.
Indeed. Thanks again.
Absolutely, Scott. Another piece of legislation was SB 1330, the Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. This one would require the Virginia Employment Commission to establish and administer a paid family medical leave program throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, beginning in 2024. Again, this is something that we teamed up with a number of chambers of commerce and trade associations and businesses from across the Commonwealth of Virginia in opposing, just because of the cost, sheer billions of dollars that it would have cost the taxpayers of Virginia in the budget. We got this bill passed by indefinitely in Senate Commerce and Labor on a vote of 12-3. HB 1902, the expanded polystyrene food service containers prohibition, civil penalty. AKA the styrofoam bill is the best way to describe it. This piece of legislation we've opposed from the beginning. What it does is it basically bans styrofoam containers as to-go containers for restaurants. We believe that given the COVID-19 crisis, this is something that isn't exactly the best thing to do for businesses, especially restaurants that are relying heavily on takeout. Unfortunately, we were not able to kill the bill on the House side. It did pass the House earlier this week on a vote of 58-40 and has been referred to the Senate Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources Committee. It'll be heard on Tuesday. This is a bill that you more than likely, if not today, tomorrow, once we get a few more pieces of information, we will be receiving an email about on behalf of the Prince William Chamber, urging you to reach out to the members of that committee, asking them to oppose that bill so that hopefully we can kill it in the Senate Ag Committee. Again, bad for business, especially during a time when businesses are relying on takeout. HB 1894, VA Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. Earlier on, you all may remember that the governor and the Supreme Court voted on a measure that would have allowed for tenants to basically not have to pay their rent for an extended period of time due to the COVID-19 crisis. What this piece of legislation did was make that plan permanent. This is something that we teamed up with the Virginia Apartment Management Association and the Office Management Association to oppose this piece of legislation. Unfortunately, it did pass the General Law Subcommittee on a vote of 6-1. We are currently working with those trade associations and other groups to oppose the bill at the full committee, and we will see and update you all as we continue to work on this piece of legislation. And that is kind of the overall for the week. What I will do as well is I wanted to share with everybody, I hope it is up, the Virginia Chamber of Commerce website, the bills we are watching. So just so everybody knows, last week I mentioned that we have about 1,200, 1,600 bills that we're currently kind of ciphering through to determine if they are pro-business, anti-business, where we take a stance on them. So what we've done is we've teamed up with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce. This is something we started doing about a year and a half, 2 years ago when we teamed up with them on the Election Center. What this does is it provides 18 different categories on a variety of pieces of legislation and key areas that we feel are important for our members to follow up and just kind of track legislation so they're not going through the Virginia Legislative Information System like we have to go through, but just so they can kind of watch it. Those different categories include the budget, broadband, economic development, education and workforce, elections, energy, environment, healthcare, innovation and technology, labor and employment issues, legal climate issues, procurement issues, small business related issues, taxes, transportation, a new one we added this year given the governor's initiatives, marijuana, unemployment insurance and workers' compensation, and criminal justice reform. Again, this website is something I can provide to you all if you would like it. Does provide for detailed information on specific pieces of legislation that are being heard in those variety of different topics that we had mentioned before. So again, we can definitely share that with everybody here in attendance today if you'd like us to do that. And with that, that is our legislative update for the week, and I'm open to any questions, comments, concerns that the group may have. Any at all, I swear, I'll take them all. Perfect. Yes, I can definitely get that over to you, Michelle. So yes, after this meeting is over, I will get the downloaded list of all those who registered for the event, and I will send that over to everybody for your review and for your ease. Again, a reminder: next week we do have Senator Jeremy McPike joining us for the key speaker for the event. That will be at 10 o'clock, though. That is a change of time. We'll be sending out notification of that on Monday for everybody. And again, if there are no further questions, thank you all so much for joining us today. And if you have any other further questions that you don't want to ask here online, please feel free to call or email me. You all have my phone number, 703-618-1422, and my email. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a good rest of the weekend.